Hi, welcome back. I wanted to do a rather quick video on all the chemicals that I use in the shop. It comes up from time to time that people ask about one specific thing that I use and do not clearly mention what it is or why I use it or whatever. So here is a compilation of all the chemicals. I divided it in a bunch of groups. I have glues, aka sticking stuff together. I have cutting oils, aka make stuff go apart. Rust protection, cleaning and solvents, and lubrication for machines, and support chemicals for the machinist. So let's start with the obvious, the support chemicals for the machinist. We have regular table salt, because, well, I like to eat here in the shop sometimes. A little snack like slice of cheese, hard-boiled egg, and then it's nice to have some salt around. Use with caution, don't use too much salt. Everything that we eat has way too much salt in it anyways. And then, of course, either coffee with a generous amount of milk, 3.5% fat, usually 4/5 coffee and 1/5 milk. That's a decent mix. Or if I already have too much coffee, tea, Earl Grey, hot, with a coffee spoonful of honey for sweetening it. Okay, now that the machinist is well lubricated and ready to go, we have cleaners. And the cleaners can be divided in two subgroups. We have on the right side stuff that doesn't kill you immediately, and on the left side we have stuff that, well, it's not good for you. Very low-key cleaner is glass cleaner. Alcohol-based glass cleaner is super good for cleaning machines, like the painted surfaces of machines, or also for the surface plate. There are two kinds of glass cleaner. One is ammonia-based and one is alcohol-based. I like the alcohol-based because I can't stand the smell of the ammonia-based ones. Regular dish soap. This is nice. Sometimes a very simple way to get parts clean and ready for shipping. Hot water, a brush, and some dish soap. It gives extremely clean parts. Very good, degreased, just very simple, cheap, and very harmless. And then we have Garant Green Plus. This is a rebranded cleaner from BioCircle. If you Google BioCircle, you will find the people, and I think this is their CB100 cleaner. This is their alternative to brake cleaners. It's water-based with stuff in it, but it doesn't count as a hazardous material, and that's quite nice because I do not like regular brake cleaner out of the spray bottle or the large canisters. I can't stand the smell, I don't like how it behaves, and I don't want to have it in the shop, and I don't have it in the shop. So that's what I use instead. It's it's not very cheap, but I don't use it very much either. It's nice for used machines to get them ready and operational, cleaning off old coolant gunk, old grease, and just get stuff ready to go. Then we have cleaners that are a little bit more dangerous. One is petroleum. It's a solvent, and it's pretty much the same as WD-40. In fact, that's what I put in my WD-40 bottles, and I add a little bit of oil to it, so it behaves extremely similar to the real deal, just at 1/10 of the price. A good cleaner, terrible lubricant, of course. WD-40 as a lubricant is just insanely bad, but that's not what it was made for. very good cleaner. You can use it to flush gearboxes of machines. It's very good at cleaning bearings, because stuff that you clean in it doesn't want to rust immediately. If you use a heavy degreaser like acetone or isopropyl alcohol, there is on bearings an immediate danger of flash rusting. So that's quite useful. This is dangerous. This sign is CMR danger. So be aware. Wear gloves when you are around it. Then I keep isopropyl alcohol around just as an all-around cleaner. Light degreaser, solvent to some glues and solvent to some tapes. And also it's a good cutting fluid for non-ferrous metals like aluminium, brass, copper, some plastics. Careful with some plastics, you get stress cracks when you apply alcohol to it. Polycarbonate is extremely prone to stress cracking if isopropyl alcohol is applied. So careful. This is a CD-ROM. This is an ancient storage medium for data. These used to hold 650 megabytes of data. They were, I grew up with them. So what I wanted to show you in reality is the transparent layer of a CD is polycarbonate, Laxan. Means CDs are extremely flexible and don't really want to shatter or break on you. But as I mentioned earlier, isopropyl alcohol can lead to stress fracture or stress cracking of plastics. Means once it's under pressure like this and you apply alcohol, it explodes very dramatically. That's a good party trick if you have people you don't like. Let's do another one. So as you can see, you can always almost 180 degree bend a CD without getting in trouble. As you can see, I'm really bending it to a full U shape. Let's only go like this and add some alcohol on it. And it explodes. And it's not because the alcohol is dissolving the polycarbonate. Polycarbonate doesn't care about it from a solvent standpoint. But there is a effect, and you will find scientific papers on it. It's stress-induced cracking of plastics under influence of alcohols or under influence of solvents. That's your homework to Google yourself. I'm going to break another CD because this is quite entertaining. So full bend, CD doesn't care. I can hold it forever here. We don't get any discoloration from material getting overstressed. But the second, well, let's try something different. Okay, it's under load. Now I have a rag with isopropyl alcohol. You instantly see that it creates cracks and explodes. So that's the reason why you have to be careful with alcohol in certain plastics and not create a horrendous mess with shattered CDs. Read the material data sheets if you do stuff like that. Acetone, this is just one step up from the isopropyl alcohol for me. This is just a more gnarly solvent. It's extremely good at degreasing. It dissolves some plastics like polystyrene. Some plastics get attacked by it, and some plastics like PEEK are completely unharmed by it. So again, read the material data sheets if you want to know more. This will go through pretty much any glove that you can have in the shop. The only gloves that will stand up to it for longer than a few minutes are very heavy rubber gloves. And those are super impractical for pretty much anything if you are not in a NBC unit. But it's sometimes useful to keep around it. And it's also my choice of solvent to remove super glue. When I use super glue for work holding, this is used to remove the remains. Try not to get it on your hands, or drink it, or breathe it. Then I have one last cleaner. This is a industrial or a commercial kitchen cleaner. This is literally used to clean out large commercial kitchens to get everything free of grease. It's a boot sealed Bistro G435, and it's a very thin liquid. I use it at a ratio of 10:1 in the ultrasonic cleaner to clean parts for final shipping. You probably can't get this outside of Germany, but there are very similar items. Okay, now that everything is clean, it wants to rust, so we need to protect it from rust. I found things that I like and things that I don't like. I like this a lot. LPS3, you spray it, and it leaves this very thick brownish layer, which dries, which you can also see up here on the spray head of the can. It dries in a wax-like consistency, and it protects part extremely well over a long period of time against, well, not only against the shop environment, but you can put stuff outside and it will stay protected quite a bit. If you can't get this stuff, there is an alternative. It's fluid film. The guys who do old-timer cars use fluid film. It works extremely similar, but it smells like wet sheep, and I can't stand the smell, so that's it's a no-go in my shop, but it works and it's an alternative. For my German viewers, it's pretty much very hard to get it in Germany. Sometimes you can pick it up on eBay, or you have to buy it in bulk at, I think, 20 or 30 cans at a time, and that's a little bit much. But that's an extremely heavy-duty rust protection, and I would not use it for example, my parallels on a milling machine. What I found that works extremely well is a microcrystalline wax for rust protection. There are two products that I found that I like. One is Renaissance wax. The British museums came up for conservation of their items on display, or for all the items. Also, those are those which are in storage. This works on metal, plastic, wood, paper, leather. It's a wax with a, I think it's like a naphtha, like a gasoline derivative as a solvent, and you put it on a rag, you apply it, and then it dries, and it just leaves a very thin layer of wax that you can even polish like you would polish a car. This works extremely well. In many cases you can leave it on the item you want to use because it's so thin. For example, I waxed the table of my bandsaw with it to keep it free of rust and be on the safe side, but I don't have to remove it before I use the bandsaw. If I, for whatever reason, I use this on the table of the bandsaw, I would have to absolutely wipe it down before I can use the saw, because this leaves a sticky mess. And there is an alternative. If you don't like a wax, there is also a liquid alternative. It's Cosmoloid H80. This is a wax, a microcrystalline wax. It comes in white chunks, and Shell Sol T is like a naphthalene. It's a gasoline, a very clean, it's a very clean gasoline, basically. If there are any chemists in my viewership, don't be mad at me, I'm not a chemist. I try to break it down in understandable terms for myself. And well, the wax is dissolved in the shell sole, and you can apply it with a rag, you can just spray it on, you can use it with a sponge. I like to wear gloves when I handle it because the shell sole is also not, well, it's not harmless. And once the shell sole has flashed off, it just leaves an extremely thin layer of wax that is not sticky, not tacky, just a thin layer of wax that protects everything from the stupid rust. When you have a temperature shift in the shop and stuff wants to rust, or if you have a visitor that has rust fingers. There are certain people who touch bare steel and you will get rusty fingerprints. This stuff protects you from that. Also, it's just good conservation media. I really like it. It works extremely well. I'm using it for a few months now and I don't hate it. And this is another rust protection. This is Meguin Rust Protection. This is a super liquid rust protection oil, which does not dry. This will stay liquid forever, or if until it has picked up enough dust out of the air so it gets nice and goopy. But this is a little bit more heavy duty than the wax, but less annoying to deal with than the LPS3. This is good if you want to go on vacation to New Zealand for a month and just make sure that your machines will not start to rust once you're gone. There are alternatives to this. Every major shop chemical supplier will have something like this, or ask your local oil supplier, or look on eBay. I'm pretty certain that the WD-40 people have something like this, or CRC, or Contact Chemie here in Germany. They all have something like this. Shell, they all have some kind of a rust protection oil that does not dry. Okay, it's protected from rust. It would be a good idea to lubricate it too, because machine tools, the cheapest maintenance and the cheapest life insurance of a machine tool is oil. So you want whey oil for your machines. I keep two viscosities around. One is ISO 68 and one is ISO 22. I will later put a dab of it out on the table so you can see the difference. But the 220 is a very thick oil and the 68 is very thin. A good whey oil, depending on the nomenclature it has, can also be used in gearboxes. It will also say on the box or on the canister you buy it in, that is suitable for bearings and gearboxes. This would go into the gearbox of the Deckel FP1, the 68 weight. Would not worry, since the machine doesn't sit in the cold. If the machine was very cold, I would use a thinner one, like a 48. And the 220 is just for machine weighs. Since it stays where it belongs, it has a heavier load bearing capacity before it makes metal to metal contact, and yeah, it's just, but it also will make the movement of a whey a little bit more, it will give more drag. So my old surface grinder, which had a V and flat slide whey, if I put 220 whey oil in it, it was a real bear to crank along. With the 68, it worked way better. So there is a reason because those two exist. And many machines require you to use an oil gun like this to press the oil into a circ fitting. And these are oil guns that I've found that keep that they don't leak like mad with oil. They are made by Sumoa Holbauer, and this is the number if this is any help to you. And they stay reasonably, well, this one is leaking, of course. Well, leaking is overstated. It has a little bit of oil on here. And this works. This one has 220 whey oil in it. This one has grease in it, but I also have different ones. Speaking of grease, I like to buy grease in these toothpaste-like containers instead of the cartridges where you take a wooden stick or a brush and stick it in, and you get all kinds of dirt into the can, and just a mess. I like these because this way I always have clean grease to work with. Of course, for a large grease gun like this, I buy the containers. So just a general purpose lithium grease. Then there is, for some spindle bearings, you need specialty greases like the Kluber Isoflex. This one is for the Deckel FP1 spindle bearings. It's an extremely expensive high-speed grease for spindle bearings. And you apply it with extreme caution because, first of all, it's expensive, and secondly, if you put too much in, the bearings will overheat like instantly. Two more lubricants. This is a white lubricant paste, white graphite, tetrahydral boron nitride, I think, is in this stuff. This is used on the bevel gears of the Deckel FP1 as lubrication. And I also have a molybdenum grease. This stuff, very much like Never-Seez or Anti-Seize, for very slow moving parts, for stuff that's under very high surface pressure against each other, screws, threads, some bearing surfaces. This is very good lubricant for that. Screws, clamming screws that get loosened and tightened a ton. This will protect or will reduce wear on the threads by a lot. Good to have around. Also apply very, very sparse, otherwise you will look like the Tin Man. Then we have cutting oils. My favorite cutting oil is Jokic Heavy Duty Cutting Oil Alpha 93. And the reason I like this is not because it's the best. I like because it doesn't stink. It's plant-based and it just works. It works for all the oddball metals like titanium or nickel alloys without a problem. It does tapping, reaming, drilling, turning, milling. You can use it for punching. Just very versatile. It's not super sticky. It's easy to clean off. It doesn't do funny things to your skin if you get it on yourself. It doesn't kill you. It's just a very nice cutting oil. If you ask people on like Practical Machinist or any old hobby forum what their favorite cutting oil is, you will get all sorts of, I have 17 different cutting oils in the shop and I use this for this, and milk to cut copper, and lard for cutting tin and whatever, and mixing stuff, and or using the old cutting oils that had tetrachloroethene in it that makes you all cancer. I don't see a need for it. This works very well with good tooling. I never had issues with this cutting oil. It's not super cheap, but it works. Then we have water-based coolants, what people run in real machine centers. Comes as oil. Looks like this, like oil. And this is mixable with water. You mix it, for example, 10 to 1. 10 parts water and 1 part of the oil. And then you get this milky liquid, which is very good at cooling the cut because water is extremely good at carrying away the heat. And a little bit of lubrication from the oil content. It can go bad. It can grow all kinds of funny fungi in it, and you will smell if that happens. And that's also very dangerous, by the way. You can get all sorts of allergies from this stuff. So if you buy an old machine that has has old coolant in it, do yourself a favor and do a full cleanup of the machine. Rinse and wash the coolant containers so you don't get a Last of Us situation where you get killed by the fungi. And then there is the this is a wax stick, a cutting wax stick, mostly used on the bandsaw. You just go tangentially by the blade and scrape off a little bit against the running saw blade, and this will lubricate the saw blade for cutting aluminium, for example, so you don't get cold welding of the chip to the saw blade. Helps very much. Also, you can use it, for example, for drilling and tapping. You just take your tap and you just rub it over the wax and you can do your tapping. Sometimes that's useful if you have to work inside of a machine and you don't want to deal with oil in the machine. Very useful. Don't cut straight into it with the bandsaw blade and make all kind of a mess out of the wax stick. Just whoop, go by the blade and scrape off a little bit. That's absolutely enough. So that's stuff to cut stuff apart. And now that the stuff is apart, we want to glue or stick a thing to another thing to make a double thing. Super glue. There are so many super glues, very good super glues, very cheap super glues, and very expensive super glues. I like this stuff, Sikimate 85. Why do I like this? Because I know it. This is what we bought at Siemens. We used it for years, and it's not the strongest, it's not the fastest, it's not the best, but I know how it behaves, and I know exactly what I get when I use it. I also like the rubber reinforced Loctite super glues like the 380 Black Max, but I don't have it here currently because it's also very expensive, but I keep this around. I also use this for work holding on the milling machine. It's just a super thin super glue, and that's usually what I keep around. With the super glue, I also keep a small bag of baking soda. Baking soda in combination with the super glue builds up some structure. You can also use something like gas beads, but usually I have baking soda at home. And super glue in combination with baking soda builds up volume and dries very fast, and it's nice to build up structure, like making a gusset on the inside of a. We used it when I did model building, like plastic modeling. This was nice to build up gussets on the inside of models and reinforce stuff. Sometimes that's useful. Two-part epoxy. Don't use it very much. Usually I get by with these double syringe glues like Uhu Plus Endfest, which is a relatively slow epoxy. It's a 90-minute open time, and it takes like 12 hours until it hardens through. You can make it dry or harden way faster if you put it on a hot plate at a few degrees. And it also will harden or cure with a higher toughness if you use heat. So yeah, I like the double syringe. I usually cut the double syringe apart in the back here because the hardener and the epoxy itself are very different viscosity, and when they are still connected to each other, it always wants to cantilever to the side of the less viscous material, and it's just annoying. So this way I can control it better, I think. My favorite glue is probably Loctite 648. This is bearing retaining compound or bearing glue. It doesn't work on flat parts. You cannot really glue flat against flat with Loctite 648, despite what people say. It will dry, but the holding strength will be completely and utter useless. This is exclusively for stuff that fits into each other, like a pin in a bore, or a bushing in a bore, or a bearing in a mildly oversized bore. You can use it on press fits, and it will even gap. It will gap a difference in diameter of up to, I think, 0.2 millimeters. It's fairly temperature resistant. It's just good stuff. The strength of a good Loctite joint that's properly prepared, like cleaned everything, degreased, maybe even roughed it up with sandblasting, or scuffing it up with a carbide burr. The holding strength of Loctite on round fits is absolutely absurd. Also very resistant against chemicals. If you want to loosen a joint that you glued with Loctite 4.8 with, for example, acetone, well, good luck. You will be there until the glue joint will survive you. That's pretty sure. So along with the Loctite 648, we have Loctite's screw retaining compound. High strength, medium strength, and low strength. This is just for screws. Sometimes you can use the 648 as a screw retainer. Sometimes you can use the high strength screw retainer as bearing glue. But that's just to keep screws from falling out. The super low strength Loctite is an interesting one. This is also an insurance that you will get a screw out in 20 years. If you ever had to undo a screw that was in the elements and is really rusted into its thread, well, it's rather annoying. It's all sorts of impact wrench and torch and make stuff go and trying some penetrating oils which never work. If the guy who assembled it used Loctite low strength, like 221, it will come out very easy. Low strength Loctite is tool removable. You can undo the screw with a tool, and where there is Loctite, there won't be rust. So that's a little trick for you. Another glue is Loctite 326. It's a acrylic glue, a structural glue. This is very good to glue larger chunks of metal together. I think I used it. Yeah, I used it here on the D-bit grinder to glue this piece of cast iron to this casting to build up this area. And that's what the 326 is very good at. It requires the Loctite activator number, this stuff. You need to use them together. This activator also helps Loctite 648 or the other with certain materials like brass or copper. Crystal Bond 509. This comes in these chunks. This is a hot glue. This is a hot melt glue mostly used in semiconductor industry for holding silicon wafers for slicing, I think. And you just heat it up with a hot air gun a little bit and you can glue parts together like watchmakers used to do with shellac. This works often better than shellac. It's extremely brittle and rigid compared to shellac, which has a little bit more give to it. There is also the stuff that's used by people who do archery. They also have a specialty hot glue, hot melt glue, which I have somewhere, but I cannot find it currently. That's also an alternative to the Crystal Bond. The Crystal Bond is very expensive again, as many shop chemicals are surprisingly expensive. So that's the Crystal Bond. You might see me one day use it here in the shop. I have one customer part that I use it on, but that's an NDA part I cannot show you to you. You heat up the part that you want to glue something to it. You add a little, you just use it like a crayon on it. You melt a little bit of the Crystal Bond onto it. Place your part, use a tweezer to press it down, let it cool down, and then you can do some extremely light machining, like grinding or face milling with it. So it's kind of useful to have around. Here is an example of drawers that I have labeled with black gaffer tape and a silver paint marker. And I like it. I like the look of it. It's very low effort. I don't need the label printer for it. Not everybody likes how it looks, but it's my shop. I have to like it. Here's a close-up when working with the 3M 467 tape. Used a little bit of isopropyl alcohol on this ground block to degrease it. And there is a short piece of the tape. Whoops. And let's apply the tape. Burnish it down nicely with the end of the tweezers. And now we can pull off the carrier tape. And now we have the glue layer on here. And now we could, for example, stick this gauge block to it. But the piece of 3M tape that I applied was a little bit messed up on the end, so I'm going to reapply it. It scrapes off very easy with a single edge razor blade. Quick wipe with the alcohol. Lifting off the carrier tape. There we go. That's how it should look. And now we can, for example, put a piece on here, and it's nicely stuck in place. This is not a rigid connection. This has a little bit of give to it, as you can see. But for example, to hold some blocking or packing in a vise in place to hold apart, it's fine. I would not use it to glue, for example, a stop block that's sideways loaded into a vise. But yeah, that's the 467 MP tape, and it's reasonably easy to undo. Here are the two whey oils that I use. On the left we have the ISO 220, which, as you can see, it's really pulling like, when I go with a toothpick in it, it really pulls like a string. And over here we have the 68 weight. It's also pulling a string, but way less noticeable than the heavier weight oil. And when we put this is a Petri dish, and I'm going to put it on inclined plane now, and we will see how fast it runs down the plane. This is like watching paint dry or oil go down an inclined plane. And as you can see, the 68 weight oil moves way quicker because it's way thinner oil. The 220 is not very motivated to go downhill. That's just to give you an idea of the difference between the 220 and the 68 whey oil. This is brilliant content. Let's do an experiment. I have a hot plate here so the stuff dries quicker. I'm going to 75 degrees low. So I'm going to put a little bit of LPS 3 on here. Oh yeah, very controlled. Let's say we used a rag and wiped it out a little bit. We're also going to add a little bit of the Cosmoloid H80 with the shell sol. Just spread it out in a little square. And also we're going to add a little bit of the Renaissance wax. So here we go. So we're also adding a little bit of the Renaissance wax. I'm using the hot plate only to make it dry quicker, to show you results and not have you watch paint dry. Well, I'm watching paint dry. You get the final edit. The rust protection has dried, and over here the yellow film, that's the LPS 3. And you can see it's kind of tacky and smeary, but this thick film, this tacky film, is very, very good at keeping the elements away from the metal you want to protect. But also it cleans up okay-ish. But it's a lot of stuff to wipe off. A little bit of isopropyl alcohol helps because it dissolves the wax. here is the Cosmoloid H80. And you cannot really see it, but when I rub my finger over it, you see it kind of change its reflectivity. And also I can feel that there is something on the metal. Hard to tell, but this is really a very thin, very discreet film of wax that protects your tooling or the workpieces that you're shipping out. Now you can see it way better. So that's the wax layer. And over here we have the Renaissance wax, which now has completely dried, and we can use a dry rag, and we can even buff it out. If you had applied it a little bit more careful, this would look better. But also you have this very discreet film of wax on here. Hard to tell on video. Yeah, here you can see it a little bit. It kind of changes its reflectivity depending on which direction I run my finger over it. But all of these, if you want to really get them off, just use a little bit of isopropyl alcohol and give it a wipe down. And you will be fine. Okay, that's the three film building rust protection oils that I use. The fourth one that I showed you does not dry. 2 model building tricks. I have some polystyrene here. This works also with ABS. And here I have a small bottle of acetone. Since acetone dissolves polystyrene, you can use the acetone to glue it. You just hold the parts together with very small gap. Preferably you sand it flush to each other. Then you just apply a tiny bit of acetone and it will wick into the gap between the 2 parts of polystyrene. And voila, you glued it together with no additional glue, just by melting the polystyrene into each other by dissolving it. There are commercial plastic glues for model building, of course, that rely on dissolving the plastic, but during my model building and Warhammer model building times, I often used just plain acetone to melt my models together. And once the acetone has completely flashed off and the plastic has reached its starting strength again, you get a very strong joint. Currently this is not very strong, but you get the idea. So now you have glued this together, but since you have an extremely small cross section here, you want to reinforce it. Now you could either cut small triangles out of the polystyrene sheet and also weld bond or solvent glue it into here as gussets, or use our friend the super glue. You add super glue into the joint, and then you take baking soda. Oh, this is very, very crummy. And you give it a little bit of a stir, so the baking soda, which is super crummy in my case because it has drawn moisture from the air, it seems, gets consumed by the super glue. Then when you shake off the excess baking soda, you have a super ugly looking glue joint, but this reinforces a joint extremely well, and if you do this on the inside of a structure, no one will ever see it. So that's an old model building trick. Used this on a lot of Games Workshop models, especially on their metal cast models, because the fit up on those was horrendous. Oh, and bonus trick, if you buy expensive super glue and once you're done, take a piece of paper towel and wipe the nozzle down and you will never have problems with a bottle that has glued itself shut. So that's a little bonus trick with acetone for gluing plastics that can be dissolved. There are special glues, for example, for PVC, which is not dissolvable by acetone, but there are also glues that will dissolve the PVC and make it weld together by itself. That's a little bit of a stretch because these are not chemicals, but they are sticky. Some of the tapes that I like to keep around. Blue masking tape for masking stuff and labeling stuff. I also like, well, speaking of labeling, I also like some black gaffer tape for labeling stuff. I found that stuff recently, and in combination with a silver paint marker, gives very nice labels. PET tape, PET, powder. This is for powder coating the masking tape. Very, very mild glue, very smooth tape, and it's good for protecting stuff. For example, if you want to hold something in your bench vise and you don't want to scratch it up like a black oxide finished part, then this stuff works very well. And it comes off without any residue. Kapton tape. This is primarily used as an insulator or when you build transformers. Kapton is a trade name for the plastic. If you have taken apart electronics from the 80s, you have seen this absolutely. Very heat resistant, very chemical resistant, very resistant against solvents. I use it also for masking of parts against super glue. Works quite well. It's rather expensive, but since the tape is very thin, this little bit on this roll here will last me very long. Then I have a bunch of double stick tapes. 3M VHB, most people know that stuff. When you buy, for example, a GoPro accessories like glue on camera holders, it will come with a strip of VHB. It's extremely tenacious once it's on. It's basically just glue. There is no carrier to it. It's just a cover. Ugh. Come on. Okay. It's just glue. And it's not really sticky if you touch it, but once you put it between two hard surfaces and you press it down, this gets really annoying to get off again. And since it's very thick, it will also even out any discrepancies in the surface finish. Very similar to the thick foam-like double stick tape. This has a foam carrier with an extremely tenacious glue on both sides. This is so sticky. We call it Spiegelklebeband here, to glue mirrors onto walls, onto tiles, and it does it really well, and it's atrocious to get off. You can get a wire behind it and saw it off. That works quite okay, but sometimes you want to stick stuff to each other, and this will do it. This is, I think this is also 3M, yeah, it's a 3M tape. This is 467 MP, and this is also very similar to the VHB tape. This is only glue on a paper carrier, but very thin. This will not equalize any surface roughness. This will hold stuff that's very flat to each other without adding much thickness. Sometimes useful. Also useful to make your own stickers or decals. If you want to glue, for example, a plaque onto a machine, this stuff works quite well. And carpet tape. I like this carpet tape with the mesh inside. It sticks extremely well, but you can't pull it off without any residue. And I use this for work holding larger sheets on the CNC milling machine. Small parts, like up to this size, I will do with super glue, but larger parts I will do with carpet tape, because super glue gets annoying at larger surfaces, and this holds well enough. The only thing that you should not do is cut very much into the double stick tape, otherwise you gum up the end mill with the glue. Then you just end up with glue smeared all over the side walls of your part that you cut out, and it's annoying to clean up. So try to cut as little as possible into the double stick or carpet tape when you use it for work holding. But this works quite well. It's Tesa brand, doesn't have a number, but you will find a carpet tape that says it's releasable without any residue. So that's all the tapes that I use on a daily-ish base. Mostly I use this stuff, and the black gaffer tape for marking stuff. So let's have a quick look into my basement where the old shop used to be, because down there I have my tool crib, and that's where I store the larger containers of chemicals. And I just want to show you the tool crib while I'm here, or while you are here. In the basement I keep, this is the old shop. This is, as you remember from my older videos, back there I had the surface grinder, the lathe was sitting here. Over here was the manual milling machine, and over here, in this area, I had the workbench. And down here I kind of keep this is my private tool crib, since I don't have a tool crib at a day job anymore, so had to set something up myself. And down here I keep the larger container of chemicals. Isopropyl alcohol, acetone. I always have two containers. If one goes empty, I have a second one and I can reorder. I just pulled out one empty container of isopropyl alcohol today, so I'm reordering the second one. 220 whey oil and 68 whey oil. I only keep one container of whey oil because I use little enough so I notice once it goes empty. And back here I have a container of the Yokish cutting oil that I like. It's expensive, to be honest. It's really an expensive oil. Also spare petroleum, some spare machine cleaner, a spare bottle of the Cosmoloid H80 in naphthalene, and some spare rust protection oil. In here there are some spare squirt bottles. And down here I also keep I stock one size of boxes, 200 by 160 by 100. And I can ship 99% of my parts in these containers. Office supplies, Brother P-Touch labels, wooden popsicles. In here I have some Vaseline. Sometimes for certain parts, Vaseline is quite good for conserving or lubrication. Copper grease and some contact grease. Down here I also keep spare stuff like drawer organization, like these boxes and these inserts. That's all the same system from Hoffman, their grid line system. And also a little bit odd looking stuff like just a box of wrenches, because sometimes you need a wrench that you can cut apart and weld to something else to make something custom. A box of Allen wrenches, spare lock lines, some machine handles. And down here some machine replacement parts like FP1 spare parts for the CNC. In here I keep a box with air hose and spare air guns. And this is just, small C-clamps, parallel clamps or toolmaker's clamps, and small vice grips. The storage area down here is very much a work in progress, but I really like how it's coming along. I also keep measuring equipment that I don't need in the shop down here. Like in here is a large precision flat square. I need that only for rebuilding machines, same as for the 500mm straight edge. I needed it recently for rebuilding the y-axis of Deckel FP1, but otherwise I don't have use for it. Spare set of gauge pins, depth micrometer. This is a 1 to 4mm ID bore gauge. My large 300mm calipers also don't need to live in the shop. My two straight edges. This is the shorter one that I made myself, and this one I bought from a friend, but it's in dire need of being scraped because it's very banana shaped. Also, I keep some of my power tools that are not, well, I divide the power tools in two categories. Power tools that only belong to the, well, for the upkeep of the house, for home improvement stuff. And these are all the power tools that are mostly machine shop related. Jigsaw, blades, 125 angle grinder, wheels. I also have a 230mm angle grinder, but that's home improvement. That's for cutting stones and brick. That's over in the other shop. Or a handheld power planer, a large one for doing wooden beam work. That's also over in another storage area. Festool track saw. This is machining related for cutting aluminum and plastic sheet, sometimes wood. Makita router. This is the small trim router that they sell. I use this a lot for rounding over aluminum and plastic. A gear puller set. Super inexpensive gear puller, but I have given up on buying expensive pullers because you will beat them up over time anyways, and they will break because there will be a gear or pulley that you can just not get off. So I'm buying these relatively inexpensive, and they're kind of overbuilt and super clunky looking, but so far they hold up quite well. You have to keep the spindle lubricated with some heavy dry lubricant like molybdenum grease, otherwise it will seize up. But so far it works fine, and it doesn't hurt if you have to modify parts of this because it's very affordable. So I don't buy a €300 gear puller set. Hammer drill, well, that's kind of I keep it in the shop tooling because I'm hanging a lot of stuff in the shop, and the Biax BL10 power scraper. Down here I have power shear that I use once a year to cut sheet metal. This is the type that cuts a wide chip out of the center, like 3mm wide, and it does quite well on cutting straight lines without warping the sheet metal, but it's rather useless on curves. So at least on tight corners. Also the air turbine spindle doesn't have to live in a shop either. This is the planetary spindle that can go either in a tool post of a lathe, but since the air connector here can spin freely, you can also put this in the boring head of a milling machine and use your milling machine as a improvised jig grinder. And I keep a box of rigging equipment here. Box of 1-ton straps, doing all this through the camera, a 500 kilogram ratcheting chain hoist. This is nice to move stuff along on a flat surface or just for lifting random things, or for straightening large bent structures. I used it to straighten out some bent parts of my fence. And also I have 4 of these 2-ton jacks, hydraulic jacks around, because sometimes you need a little bit help pushing or moving something. So these are quite useful. And having 4 of them sometimes is really beneficial. And they were not expensive. I think they were 15 euros a piece. So yeah, that's the basement storage area, or the former machine shop. You can see there are still some old shelves up from when this was a machine shop. I keep the hydraulic press right now down here, measuring microscope, the tumbler with the ceramic media in here, because people sometimes ask what kind of tumbler I have. Here it is, exactly here. It's a Spirator 3.5. with a massive 0.051 kilowatt power consumption. It works quite well. It's not stupid loud because the top is actually rubber and not a hard plastic. And this was quite a good invest, 300 something euros. The small Gechter press and a spare indicator stand with table. Down here there's also the TIG welder and the cart for it. So yeah, that's my former machine shop in the basement. Now tool crib and blasting cabinet and some support equipment. Questions you never asked. So I hope you enjoyed this brief-ish overview over my shop chemicals, stuff that I use on a daily basis to keep everything going the way it should go. Also included the basement storage for no apparent reason other to draw this video out. And I did this for a reason, not just completely random. During the Christmas time, the content release on YouTube is a little bit slower. People spend time with their families and stuff like that, which is very understandable and should be priority at all. And since I had a little bit of time, I created this video just for people who still want to watch stuff during this time. So there is a little bit more content out there, and I tried to make it worthwhile. So this releases most likely on the 25th of December. No matter what you celebrate in your part of the world, no matter if you're celebrating alone or if you're alone during these days, if you are with friends, family, or your partner, make the best out of it. Don't get consumed by the thought of it. Those days have to be perfect. They most likely will not be perfect. That's Hollywood stuff. If you're alone during these days, comfort yourself. Go to the movies, make your favorite dinner. Take a nice long walk, or just do something that you enjoy. For me, it's going into the shop. So, yeah, make the best of it. Thank you all for watching, and I'll be back.